Welcome to a brand new episode of the Jampack Report today for January the 29th of 2020. Of course, my name is Samuel Adams, and this is a daily gaming news podcast meant to bring you the hottest news that you need to know from around the industry, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, right here on YouTube and podcast services around the world. So if you enjoy the show, you like what you see, be sure to hit that subscribe button and keep coming back for more. But today we have some pretty big news about Microsoft and its sales, because the gaming side of the company is not looking so hot. We will talk more about the performance in the second quarter of the 2020 fiscal year, because man, there is a lot to break down there, and apparently Fortnite is to blame for lackluster performance. On top of that, we are talking about Phil Spencer's preference, frame rate over resolution, and what that means for the next generation of consoles. Nintendo has won a pretty big lawsuit against IRL Mario Kart tours. Half-Life Alyx blew the Valve Index sales out of the water for 2019. Dauntless developer has been purchased by a pretty big name in gaming. And finally, I've got your February PlayStation Plus free games of the month that you can start clearing off hard drive space to download and then inevitably maybe play if you get time. But that is our lineup for today's show, and as always, I hope you enjoy it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. First off, Microsoft's gaming revenue is down due to hardware sales and possibly Fortnite. And so this is coming to us from Forbes. Of course, Microsoft released their earnings today, and everything looks pretty good across the board except for gaming and a couple of other areas. Also, the Surface tablets absolutely killing it, apparently, for some reason. However, of course, Forbes has their specific format, and so the top line is that Microsoft reported a 21% year-over-year decrease in second quarter gaming revenue, pointing to a 43% dip in hardware sales, as well as the high performance of a third-party game in 2018, which is possibly Epic Games' Fortnite. Nielsen's Superdata estimates that Fortnite revenue in 2019 dropped 25% to a still impressive $1.8 billion, and given its ubiquity and prior impact on game stocks during its heyday, it would not be surprising if a noted third-party game affecting sales is Epic's hit Smash. Another culprit could be Red Dead Redemption 2, which shipped 17 million copies in its first 2 weeks of sale back in 2018. While sales are expectedly lower given the impending holiday launch of the Xbox Series X, subscriptions are up, which bodes well given Microsoft's focus on its Netflix-like Game Pass for the upcoming console cycle. For the 6 months ending on December the 31st, gaming revenue hit $1.1 billion, a 16% drop year over year, and overall, Microsoft beat analyst expectations, delivering earnings per share of $1.51, a 40% increase. The big number is $1.28 trillion. Microsoft's market cap is 4 commas, matched only by Apple's $1.42 trillion. And of course, in a further reading, in a surprise twist for the first year or two, Xbox Series X games will be compatible with the current Xbox One generation. We have talked about that on a prior episode of the Jampack Report. This is some pretty shocking news because of the amount that the revenue is down. Of course, revenue across the board is going to be down in gaming because we are on the cusp of a new generation. You can think of it simply as somebody walking into GameStop wanting a new console. If they hear that there's going to be a new console within the next 12 months, they probably aren't going to invest $500 in an Xbox One X or $499, $400, whatever it might be, for a PS4 Pro. They are going to hang on to that money and save it and spend it down the line to get the newest of the new. So a decrease is expected. But 21% year over year, that is insane. And on top of that, the Xbox, although numbers have not been released officially, has not performed well this generation overall. So I think that Microsoft is definitely shifting its focus to the future of Xbox. Of course, you see these dips and you think, man, is this the end of the Xbox brand? Absolutely not. The power of that brand, and of course, the popularity of the Xbox console continues to maintain. It is a pretty steady amount of fanfare going on with the Xbox console, and as the generation has gone on, more people have gotten on board, and more people are beginning to get in line, especially with the value that Game Pass brings to the table. But I do think there is a point here if Fortnite is the third-party game that they are talking about, because Fortnite, of course, has been on the decline for quite some time. It's still one of the biggest games in the world, if not the biggest game in the world, but it is not what it once was in its heyday. And so as more people have fallen off playing Fortnite on a regular basis, a lot of those Xboxes that might have been purchased specifically to play Fortnite might not be getting the love that they deserve. And of course, more people are not going out and getting in on the worldwide sensation, which is hanging up sales details a bit. So if you were curious as to how Microsoft's gaming revenue is doing, it's not looking so good, but I suppose we will have to wait and see what happens this holiday season once the new PlayStation and Xbox consoles have hit the market. But speaking of the next consoles, Phil Spencer, of course, a big name over there in the Microsoft Xbox space, wants the Xbox Series X to focus on frame rate over resolution. The Series X can reach 8K resolution, but Spencer is not focusing on that. Phil Spencer wants the Xbox Series X to feel as good as it looks. Speaking with Survivor, the Xbox head said he'd prefer to play games that have higher frame rates over those with a larger resolution. Even though both the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are promising 8K resolutions, Spencer has a very clear preference in the battle of pixels over frame rate. The feel of games is definitely something that we wanted to have more focus on, not just throwing more pixels up on the screen, Spencer says. We've never really tried to limit what developers are trying to do on our platform, whether it's 60 FPS on the Xbox 360 or people doing 4K 60 on the now Xbox One X. End quote. Sorry, weird way to end that sentence. Spencer goes on to say that Microsoft is focusing on giving developers the tools to try things out on any of its platforms and to feel supported by the hardware's capabilities. However, he points out that current-gen consoles are limited by underpowered CPUs, something he is looking to avoid with the Xbox Series X. Quote, I think we have reached a point with Xbox One X in the generation where games look amazing, and there's always work we can do to look more amazing. But I want games to feel as amazing as they look. We don't have that in today's generations, mainly because the CPU is underpowered relative to the GPU that's in the box. This is a refreshing and reassuring take from the head of Xbox, as 8K resolution is a controversial topic in the gaming community. Sure, 8K would be a major step up graphically when compared to 4K, but if the frame rates plummet or frequently dip, it won't feel better to play. Plus, how many people even own 8K TVs or will by the time the next generation comes out? I know that I certainly won't, and that's kind of where that sits right now. I want to come out and say, and this is shameful, I know, I own a PlayStation 4 Pro and an Xbox One X. I don't own a 4K TV nor a 4K monitor. I never have, and I probably won't for the next couple of years, because at this point it feels like we're on the cusp of 8K, so do I really want to invest hundreds of dollars into a 4K display? Probably not. And on top of that, with the hardware that we have now in the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, you can pretty much either choose 4K 60, or excuse me, you can choose 4K 30 or 1080p 60, and for me, I will always choose a higher frame rate over a higher resolution because the feel of a game is changed dramatically by having that additional frame rate coverage as compared to having additional resolution, because it just makes a whole different experience. Case in point, whenever God of War came out, the 2018 hit, I was using my base same launch day PS4 that I had had for the past however many years it was at that point. And it was running okay, but the fan was beginning to speed up. It seemed like things were beginning to kind of take a decline, and I wanted to get my bang for my buck while the console was still functional. So I took my launch day PS4, went down to my GameStop and said, hey, hook me up with one of those pro joints, you know, give me the good. And that's exactly what I said. I walked up to the retail associate and I said, give me the good. But he hooked me up with a PS4 Pro, and I came home and I popped God of War back in, and lo and behold, if that wasn't a totally different game, entirely different game, something that was blowing my mind, and I have not looked back since. Now I run the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro. I love my console gaming experience, which is why I've pretty much all but abandoned PC gaming. But that's a topic for another day. The Xbox Series X should give players the option to choose between 4K 60 and 8K 30 or whatever the new norm might be. Of course, targeting an 8K resolution is pretty much future-proofing the next console because 8K is inevitably going to be coming around very quickly after the launch of 4K on these base home consoles is the expectation. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how good it can be. But personally, your boy, I'm going to be running that 1080p 240. That's what I'm looking for in my next generation gaming experience. However, Nintendo has won a legal battle against one of Tokyo's real-life Mario Kart tours. Japan's highest intellectual property rights court ordered the tour company to pay a 50 million yen fine. That sounds like a lot of dollars. Mario Kart-themed go-karts may soon disappear from the streets of Tokyo following a decisive legal win by Nintendo. On Wednesday, the gaming giant announced that Japan's intellectual property high court had ordered Mari Mobility, one of the more popular go-kart operators in Tokyo, to pay a 50 million yen, approximately $458,000 fine for infringing on its IP rights. The court order ends a multi-year legal battle between the two that started in 2017 when Nintendo sued Mario Mobility, then known as Maricar, for copyright infringement. In 2018, a court ordered the company to pay a 10 million yen, approximately $91,600 fine. While several other companies offered Mario-themed go-kart tours, Maricar was one of the more popular ones. It managed to get a reprieve by appealing the ruling and attempting to distance itself from Nintendo by rebranding itself as a superhero-themed attraction called Street Kart. The severity of the fine is likely to scare away some of Maricar's imitators. Most Tokyoites will likely welcome the decision as well. In one instance, a Taiwanese tourist was involved in a hit and run with a local cyclist. You can't be throwing banana peels, man. That's your own fault. If go-karting as a Nintendo character has been on your bucket list, the good news is that Nintendo plans to open a Mario Kart ride as part of its upcoming Super Nintendo World theme park in Osaka. Oh man, this is just a perfect example of how if you have an idea and you think it sounds good and it's using another intellectual property, just go ahead and scrap it and or ask for the permission to do so, because it can either work out one of two ways. If you scrap it, then you have no risk of being taken to court and essentially being charged nearly $500,000. But on top of that, if you ask and it works out, then you can get in on a base business operation that could be a booming success for tourism across the country. Or you could get turned down, and again, you don't have to go to court. So the odds are ever in your favor if you just play by the books. And so as you can see here, this is the Maricar in action. But this is something that was never meant to work out. And of course, if Nintendo takes down a YouTube video, even showcasing 30 seconds of one of their games, what makes you think you were going to be able to run a go-kart operation in the middle of Japan and get away with it? You're not. And you didn't. So therefore, don't do it. However, Half-Life Alyx, the brand new VR game that is bringing players back into the Half-Life universe, has more than doubled Valve Index sales in 2019. It looks like Valve's decision to make the next Half-Life a VR title is already paying off, as Valve Index headset sales more than doubled in 2019 following Half-Life Alyx's announcement. According to stats from SuperData, Valve Index sold 46,000 units last year prior to Q4, but after Alyx was announced in November, that figure jumped to 149,000. That means 103,000 headsets were sold between October and December, more than double what had been sold for the rest of the year. The stats are impressive, particularly considering the hefty price of a VR kit, currently £919, but they could have been even higher, as nearly every package of the headset sold out worldwide by the 15th of January. Those hoping to buy an Index are still greeted with an out-of-stock message on the official store page and are instead prompted to sign up for email notifications. So how does this compare to other VR headsets on the market? SuperData says Index is currently the best-selling PC VR headset, but as you can see in the graph below, it is still some way behind the PlayStation VR and the standalone Oculus Quest. In terms of the total Steam user market share, meanwhile, the Index is still only used by a small number, as the latest figures from Valve report an active monthly user base of 90 million as of 2018. But then, given the price of a headset, maybe you don't need the whole market. And indeed you don't. But those who purchase the headset get a copy of Half-Life Alyx included for free, and it's a strategy that's driving hardware sales for Valve. Once headsets are back in stock once more, we can probably expect to see further impressive results ahead of the game's launch in March. So the first thing that I want to make very clear here is that the PlayStation VR and the Oculus anything are pretty much not on the same level, especially not on the same level as the Valve Index. The PlayStation VR is above what I would expect from the mobile VR headsets, the stuff you see where you put a phone in, but it's not quite on par with the other big names out there. And so the Oculus Quest obviously going to be pretty much the go-to VR headset for a lot of people, but the Valve Index, including Half-Life Alyx, certainly did see a big boost without a doubt. And the big question is, how big is VR going to be in the next generation? Because although PC gamers exist in their own kind of world, the next console generation does generally promote whatever the next big technology is going to be. And so if VR adoption continues and if people continue playing VR games and this trend continues to grow, then it could become a bigger part of gaming than I think any of us are actually anticipating. I never thought that VR would actually take off, but as time has gone by, I've been pretty impressed at how resilient it has been. Now, I do not own a PSVR nor any other headset except for a Google Cardboard, which came out back whenever VR was nothing more than a fun science project, but I digress. I would be interested in buying one, but it's going to have to take a pretty big game and a pretty hefty price drop for me to actually get on board with dropping a couple of $100, if not $1,000, on a brand new VR headset. And as technology does continue to grow and evolve, I want to be able to have a standalone headset that's not tethered to anything. Wireless connectivity is imperative for me to have a good time with it, because I don't want to be tethered to my PlayStation and or PC. I say as I sit in front of my PC, but regardless, Dauntless's developer has been acquired by Garena. I think that's how you say that. Phoenix Labs is a one and done as an independent developer, as Garena today announced that it has acquired the studio behind the free-to-play co-op action hit Dauntless. It may seem like an unusual pairing at first glance. Vancouver-based Phoenix Labs has a strong pedigree in AAA PC and console development, while Singapore's Garena has more of a mobile focus, particularly in Southeast Asia. Speaking with GI.biz this week, Phoenix Labs co-founder and CEO Jesse Houston says the acquisition will help each company bolster areas they have not been specialized in before. Quote, "We've got a pretty good background in PC and console development," Houston says, "but if the next frontier for us is mobile, and then there are a number of emerging markets we want to attack. So we are trying to decide if we want to develop these competencies, internally or work with external groups. If they were going to look at external groups, Garena was a natural choice. It had been an original investor in Phoenix Labs, so there was a pre-existing relationship, and has proven success in areas where Phoenix Labs lacked experience. Even if most of Garena's games lack a global footprint, the one big exception to that, the global survival shooter Free Fire, is a huge one. It's brought in more than $1 billion since its launch 2 years ago, and was the highest grossing mobile game in Latin America and Southeast Asia for the quarter ending on September the 30th of 2019, according to App Annie, in addition to being the highest grossing game in India on the Google Play Store. Free Fire has been a hit in regions where we are not yet strong and where we have aspirations of being strong, Houston notes, adding those regions represent a really interesting and unique publishing challenge beyond the language barriers, just with consumer expectations differences. Garena is obviously huge in Southeast Asia, but they're also right now the largest publisher in South America. They've got a huge presence in India, and the Middle East is next on deck for them. They're basically going everywhere we have not gone, and been able to leverage that expertise is really interesting. So will this deal change the plan for Phoenix Labs going forward? Yes, insofar as the Garena folks are largely going to leave us alone and will bankroll our growth, Houston says. One of the things I've been really lucky is have a great access to what? One of the things I've been really lucky is great access to talent. Write your quotes, man. You got to clean them up just a little bit. Just make them sensible. I love my team, easily the best team I've ever built in my life, and our growth in terms of hiring folks has been limited entirely by our budget and our capitalization. Garena has seen that and is super into enabling us to grow in the directions we want. In terms of other games, we are entirely focused on Dauntless right now. There is still a lot of game to be built, and our goal with Dauntless is to make it into the best free-to-play MMO in the history of video games, and we are still on a path there. I think we'll continue to focus on Dauntless for the foreseeable future and grow to support our future ambitions. As for why now is the right time to sell Phoenix Labs, Houston says it was not due to investor pressure. As a venture-backed company, Phoenix Labs would eventually have to create a payday for its investors, Houston says. And while the clock was ticking to some degree, he believes it's preferable to sell before that pressure ramps up. There are great times to sell a team, Houston says, and if we are going to, you definitely want to be doing it when your game is going well. You never want to sell when you need to sell, and Dauntless is going great this year. We are also still at the scale where you can be relatively picky on who the potential acquirers are. If Phoenix Labs had continued to grow, it might have meant a bigger payday for everyone involved, but it also would have limited an array of possible purchasers to mammoth companies like Activision Blizzard and Tencent of the world. I was really happy that I got to be a bit more picky on which groups we wanted to work with, rather than whoever just had a big enough wallet to afford us, Houston says. If that sounds unusual for an entrepreneur who got their big exit and will be out of the door soon as the options in their employment retention clause vest, it may be because Houston appears not to be that entrepreneur. I started this company to work with the people who I had an opportunity to make my best games with, Houston says. More than half of this studio has shipped games with me before Dauntless, so I already work with my favorite people in the whole wide world. I don't think people get it when I say I want to retire here. I actually do. I work with the best people that I know, and I've spent years and years building these relationships. It's a pleasure coming into work every day. So would I ever leave Phoenix Labs and start new things? It's not in the cards today, but it would be really hard for me to want to do that given how much of my career is based in creating really awesome entertainment experiences with a specific group of people. That was a lot of reading quotes that are very verbatim. Anyways, this is neat. So Dauntless, of course, is the big free-to-play Monster Hunter world. That's basically what that is. And so it's got a cool art style, and of course, it's gained a ton of traction around the world as it has launched on consoles as well as PC. Now, with that being said, now was the prime time for them to sell because the game, as they mentioned, is going very, very well, all things considered, and so it definitely makes sense. I'm just very interested in the thought process behind buying these big companies and then just saying, hey, here's some cash, do whatever you need to do. Because it always works out, but so few people seem to be doing that. And so if you find a company that knows what they're doing, that is responsible with their money and their funding, then it can really be a big payoff in the long run. And I think that's what Garena is banking on here with Dauntless's developer, Phoenix Labs. So if you are a fan of Dauntless, know that it's not changing. In fact, it's growing. But now there is a new owner over there behind the scenes. But finally, to round out today's show, I have February's free PlayStation Plus games for you, including Bioshock the Collection, The Sims 4, and Firewall 0 Hour. February is loaded with not 2, not 3, but potentially up to 5 free PlayStation Plus games. Sort of. Bioshock the Collection contains 3 legendary first-person adventures, The Sims 4 gives you creative control over reality itself, and Firewall 0 Hour offers engaging online multiplayer for PSVR owners. More on this month's free games. From the undersea city of Rapture to the airborne metropolis of Columbia, Bioshock the Collection takes players on monumental journeys through awe-inspiring, deceptively dangerous places that are simply unforgettable. Bioshock the Collection features all 3 games in this award-winning series, Bioshock, Bioshock 2, and Bioshock Infinite, remastered in 1080p, including all single-player add-on content. The Sims 4. The Sims is celebrating its 20th birthday this February, and you are invited to join the party. Now is your chance to play with life in The Sims 4, where you can unleash your imagination and create Sims in a unique world that is an expression of you. And finally, Firewall 0 Hour requires PlayStation VR. That's past tense. Become a hired contractor and expertly seize or protect sensitive information from opposing teams in Firewall 0 Hour, a 4v4 tactical shooter developed exclusively for PlayStation VR. Dive straight into these intense multiplayer battles when Firewall 0 Hour's new season, Operation Black Dawn, also begins February the 4th, featuring a new map, Oil Rig, available for all players, and other free content. All 3 games will be available from the 4th of February to March the 2nd, and this means January's games will be available via PlayStation Plus for a few more days, so grab them before they are gone. Hands down, this is one of the best months of PlayStation Plus ever, in my opinion, because Bioshock is phenomenal. I love all 3 of these games. Specifically, Bioshock 2 is one that I poured countless hours into, and I must admit I'm planning a playthrough of my own. I really should get back into these games and earn those trophies on the PlayStation 4. But some months, you know, I'm not gonna lie, some months they shit the bed. Xbox Live had one of those months in February 2020. It is really just a sad lineup. So PlayStation Plus is dominating this month with a pretty big AAA collection on top of The Sims 4 and a big PSVR game. So if you are a PlayStation fan, by all means dive in, add these to your account, even if you are not playing them, because you still get to keep them as long as you have a PlayStation Plus subscription, even if you don't play them. So you can go back retroactively whenever there's nothing launching for the rest of the year, because, you know, it's a quiet year, right? Right? Anyways, that rounds out today's episode of the Jampack Report. Of course, I hope you enjoyed today's show, and if you did, be sure to drop me a like down below and let me know what you think about today's news, and on top of that, what you think specifically about Microsoft's gaming revenue plummeting over the course of the last quarter. Would love to hear your thoughts on that one. But until next time, you guys have a phenomenal rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon, and peace.